everyone, and welcome to VLGA Connect. It's time for the weekly governance update, which is brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. And it's that time of the week where we pick the brain of the VLGA's Chief of Staff, Stephen Cooper, just to see if there's anything still in there. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Chris. It'll be a quick recording today, won't it?
I suspect the opposite. You haven't looked at the list that I've put together of topics for this week, Stephen.
Oh, I can't wait, Chris. This will be exciting, won't it? We'll be living on the edge.
Let's live on the edge. Now, I haven't seen any of the news this morning, I must admit. Got up, went for a walk with the dogs and listened to some new release country from Apple Music, which is my choice at the moment for replacement of Spotify. I'm on the trial. We'll see how it goes. So I did not hear what Barnaby Joyce had to say on TV this morning, but I believe you did, and it's worth a mention.
I just pricked my attention, Chris, and you know that we diligently seek to remain apolitical on the governance update and in our work with the VLGA, because that's very important. But the Deputy Prime Minister did say something that really got my attention in terms of the culture review, in relation to the culture review and really rationalising behaviours, I suppose, Chris.
So what was it that struck you as interesting?
Well, I don't know if you've noticed, Chris, there's been a bit going on in Canberra this week. Yeah. And so obviously text messages and the release of text messages has been a topic, and how we frame these discussions becomes really important. And the framing by the Deputy Prime Minister was that it is quite normal for disparaging text messages to be sent inside organisations and within families, and that it's not the disparaging text messages that are a problem, but the motives of the person who leaked it. Now, I didn't necessarily disagree around some questioning of the motives of the leaker, but it really got me wondering, what is the culture of an organisation or a family where it would become routine to be texting other people in a disparaging tone rather than orchestrating a conversation and resolving conflict?
That's really interesting, because I would question that as well. I don't know about anybody else's family, but there's no way in my family that we use text messages to send disparaging, rude, conflict type messages. But it's be interesting to hear from watchers or viewers of this program. Use the comments field to tell us, is that normal behaviour in your family?
Is that a normal thing? I don't know about you, Chris. I'm lucky enough to have two sisters who are quite okay with starting a conversation along the lines of, what's going on there? Or even, what were you thinking? And
does that happen a lot, does it, Steve? To you?
They're very good. But it is very easy, and I was in a conversation recently, and I don't like to plug my own podcast, but with Anne-Marie Cade, a counsellor at Glen Ira. And Anne-Marie, in the most recent Making a Difference, talked about conflict entrepreneurs, so that there are people in organisations who will take the role of encouraging conflict. Now, if you are getting involved in text exchanges with those kind of people, that is not the sort of routine conduct that is going to lead to better ability to have good disagreements. Yeah. So that was.
And I think we all know the one or two counsellors that do enjoy the conflict and will use the various tools to an end. But I would suggest that most people probably think twice about saying something in writing. That includes email, text messages, etc., that they don't want to see on the front page of the newspaper or have come back to them in a more formal sense to question their ethical behaviour.
No, well, your past role as a information manager, Chris, is coming back to haunt you, because, of course, that's the other element, or another element, is you've created a record. Correct. And do we really want to see at a subsequent time? I mean, it's an interesting diagnostic if the culture of an organisation might be measured by, the tone of routine written communication.
Yeah. So I don't know whether it's because I've had my fingers burned over the years, but I had let's hypothetically, I had a call the other day from someone asking my advice on a particular issue. They weren't sure the right way to go about responding, and they said, "Can I send you this?" And I said, "No, I'd actually prefer you don't send it to me. This is as much to protect you as it is to protect me. Let's have a conversation about it." And I'm not sure people stop enough to think about, what are we actually putting in writing that might cause us a problem down the track?
Well, I think, and the putting in writing is one point, and then it's boiling it back of what is the nature of this conversation that's going on here? Is it building relationships? Is it supporting the institution of government? Is it reflecting our roles and what we're meant to be doing, or is it reflecting our kind of personal biases against particular individuals? All of those things actually go to culture, and it's the small stuff before you get to the high profile kind of, public disagreement in the chamber, I suppose, Chris.
Yeah. So I don't know. I never expected us to start with Barnaby Joyce and get to there, but it does also remind us about the current culture review process with the discussion paper that's out there for a few more weeks before submissions or comments are due back.
Yeah, 28th of February, I believe, Chris. So I would hope councils and CEOs are thinking through their commentary on that. And again, my encouragement would be to look at the small stuff that goes towards the environment where you either have a positive or a not so positive culture. And you don't know the unfortunate thing is often you don't notice the things about your positive culture. So really going and looking for how we can help people to do the right thing is really important.
Yeah, well said. Speaking of things that might come back to haunt you, the Sue Gray report is out, Steve. Partygate, as it's now being called. Have you? I haven't had a chance. I've seen some reporting on it to actually read the report. It's very accessible online. And as of recording this morning, despite the fact that the report has found some pretty serious failings, Boris is still in place as the PM in England.
We talked about the fact that self-reflection might not be Boris's strong suit. I think the thing about the report that's been interesting too, and it goes a little to public trust, is that, as I understand, there's elements that have been redacted because they've been referred off to the Metropolitan Police, and that's been turned into some jokes around paint colours that you can use to cover up blemishes like Sue Gray and Met Blue. Not my work, someone else's. But it's an interesting one that, we've talked about this notion of the fact that not all misconduct in government is criminal, and there's an element of distrust about the fact, well, is this just another cover-up that it's gone off to the police, and sort of trust in the Met Police, even in their capacity to deal with it, Chris. The other one for me on this topic, and it possibly goes, and I don't know if you want to talk about it, but there's a really strong message around crisis media management in all of this, particularly given the response in the Parliament of Boris Johnson, where he sought to deflect criticism by accusing the Leader of the Opposition of failing to investigate the Jimmy Savile matter when Sir Keir Starmer was employed at their equivalent of the Public Prosecutions Agency.
Yeah, it's probably a bigger topic that we don't have time for today, but it also takes me back just a few weeks to the whole Tennis Australia Novak Djokovic debacle, and I'm not sure the crisis management in terms of media response and messaging was effective. I don't think they got it right.
Well, let's be clear, Chris, they've been all over the shop, haven't they? They haven't known whether to be contrite, to deny, to deflect in regard to the significance, but it seemed like it was a cardinal sin, to my mind, of Boris Johnson to try to deflect away by making an allegation which it has turned out is untrue, but even if true, didn't serve him well.
No, I agree, and I will put the link to the released report in the show notes for this episode if anyone does have some time and the desire to read through the now infamous Sue Gray report and watch this space. I suspect we'll be coming back to that in the coming weeks. Steve, I was pleased to see that there are 6 Melbourne councils joining together to fight the scourge of graffiti, which makes my blood boil, I have to say. And I can remember as a CEO in a council and in a city council, it's the substations, it's the stuff on government land, etc., that has presented particular challenges for councils wanting to get on top of graffiti. So I was really pleased to see that the cities of Bayside, Burundara, Glen Ira, Kingston, Port Phillip and Stonnington have banded together, that's the word I was looking for before, to target not just their own assets and certain private assets, but also post boxes, tram stops, substations, because they've done a deal, they've got permission from government agencies and funding support from the Community Support Fund to do so. So all power to them. I hope that works really well.
Oh, I think every opportunity, and this is one in a sequence of events, Chris, around councils collaborating on what are topics that are outside, bigger than their own boundaries. So, yeah, I agree.
It's called Urban Canvas, so they've named the project, and it has come out of the Inner South Metropolitan Mayors Forum, which is also great to see that that's having some concrete actions come from it. So well done to those 6 councils. Election year, Steve. State election, of course, towards the end of the year. Federal election, we believe around May. It's looking like it'll be May, isn't it?
Looking that way. Any advocacy going on, Chris?
Yeah, so that's the theme that I think we'll be coming back to pretty regularly to highlight some of the advocacy. There's lots of announcements of funding happening, particularly at the state level from Growing Suburbs funds at the moment. There's lots of election commitments happening around the country from both sides of Parliament. So I speak to both political parties, I should say. So I speak about the Great Barrier Reef is one that the Queensland councils have certainly welcomed and noted. Anthony Albanese was in Melbourne's North last weekend announcing support for a big interchange, which is a big part of unlocking that northern growth corridor. Interesting one out of Wyndham this week. They've highlighted some new data that shows that almost twice the number of enrolments per government school than the greater Melbourne average exist in the city of Wyndham at the moment. And they've put out an urgent call for more state schools to be delivered. Worth noting here, Steve, that there's already 5 new government schools set to open in Wyndham in the next 2 years. Land has been acquired for a further 5, but such is the need here that the council is saying that's not going to go far enough. We need more in the pipeline.
You're right, Chris, and it's been a recurring theme at the interface councils in terms of the ongoing advocacy about the fact that schools, roads, drains, all of the infrastructure, the community infrastructure that you need in growing suburbs needs to be planned for and paid for as early as possible. So this isn't just an election year kind of shout out by Wyndham Council. It actually reflects some pretty long-term work that they've been doing.
It sure does, but of course an election year is going to bring these into focus through necessity, and it exercises my mind. Everyone has a story like this, particularly the growth areas, those high population growth areas have a story like this. Not everyone's going to get what they're looking for. There's only so much to go around. So it's really becoming a bit of a competition out there. Who's done the work, who's done it to the level that can, they can be really quick to respond and get the evidence in front of decision makers to get the right decisions for their communities.
And I'm like a dog with a bone on this topic, Chris, but I think it's all the more reason to hold federal and state governments to account to fund projects that are reflected in the strategic planning of organisations, whether that's the council plan, municipal health and wellbeing plan, municipal strategic statement. Money at the moment is too tight for, government funding to go off on frolics just because they're popular.
Okay, so we'll leave that one there. I'm sure there'll be more advocacy asks that we'll be focusing on in the coming weeks as councils make their plays for attention. The nominations for nominations for one by-election and the ballot packs for another are out now, Steve. So I just wanted to give a quick update. We've got a by-election coming up in Maroondah next month. This is to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Nora Lamont, the long-term councillor there who's stood down for health reasons. So nominations actually opened this week and closed next Tuesday. So that election's happening in March. And the Yarra Ranges by-election, this is the one that was created by Catherine Burnett-Wake resigning to take up an upper house position, member for Eastern Victoria, I think, from memory. Those ballot packs are in the mail this week, and the voting deadline is 6 p.m. Friday, the 18th of February. So we'll keep an eye on both of those. So a legal update, Steve. We spoke some time back about the former CEO of Ravensthorpe Shire in Western Australia. Do you recall this? This is
This was a rather salacious matter, Chris.
Yeah, that's a good word for it, Steve. Gavin Pollock is his name. He was investigated by the Crime and Corruption Commission in Western Australia. That investigation revealed the creation of fake invoices to cover up to $55,000 in payments to a sex worker. It's appeared in court this week, this matter. Gavin Pollock has appeared in court and pleaded guilty to 7 corruption charges. The ABC's reporting on this. They're suggesting of the likelihood of or the possibility at least, of a jail term now that Mr. Pollock has pleaded guilty.
I always prefer to leave those matters to the court, but that's interesting that the ABC has said that. I mean, obviously, Chris, this has got more media attention than it would otherwise because of the nature of the expenditure. It probably also just boils back to people like yourselves who are on audit and risk committees and anyone with an oversight function about what is the culture of an organisation, what are the internal controls that are in place, what's the strength of, the 3 lines of defence in your risk profile to ensure that expenditure is for a proper purpose.
I do feel for the councillors there. It doesn't do great things for the reputation of that council in that community. It'll be something that's felt for a long time. And
I agree with you, Chris. That's one of those ones where it's pretty tough. Like it sort of, would wonder for councillors, how would you know when your CEO is orchestrating that kind of thing?
Absolutely. All right, so we'll leave that one there. That's by way of an update. Another update out of Queensland this week. We've been following the Crime and Corruption Commission story there, which has included a parliamentary inquiry, which has made a number of recommendations. The chair standing down last week, and State Cabinet now agreeing to one of those recommendations that came from the parliamentary inquiry, which is to hold a commission of inquiry into the CCC, which, as you can imagine, has been welcomed by LGAQ, who have been pretty vocal on this matter.
Very interested to see that, Chris, that Tony Fitzgerald, at the age of 80, has been commissioned to conduct this inquiry, a very famous name in terms of probably the most famous Queensland inquiry. 2 tranches to the terms of reference, one being to look at the structure of the CCC, the Crime and Corruption Commission, as to how it performs its role, and the second one looking, and again, we're back to culture inside the CCC, as to the role of seconded police officers. And I'll be really interested to see whether that finds perhaps an unhealthy orientation towards prosecution rather than the identification of misconduct.
You're right, that will be interesting indeed. And what I'll find interesting too is, can it be called the Fitzgerald Inquiry? Or is it Fitzgerald Inquiry number what?
We are going to have to revisit the language, the national inquiry language, because there should really only be one Fitzgerald Inquiry. And I can't imagine this one reaching the heights of that previous one, Chris.
No, well, unlikely.
No.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Well, that's true. You never know where these inquiries will end up.
Steve, I wanted to note that there's an e-scooter trial underway in Melbourne. It's Melbourne, Port Phillip and Yarra, I think, the 3 councils running this trial. There's also one underway in Tasmania. And I did note this week that the City of Hobart has, at their council meeting this week, dealt with a number of issues that have come out of that trial, which has been underway for a little while, some concerns, community concerns. And so they're making a few changes, and I think if they're not already, the Melbourne councils are probably watching this pretty closely in terms of the experience. So they're reducing footpath speed limits. They're doing an audit of footpaths to identify additional locations where e-scooters should be prohibited. They're asking the hire operators to implement a zero tolerance policy on customers who breach safety or legislated rules. So apparently there's been some behaviour that they're not too happy about. So the council's resolved this week to address those concerns and present some more data and research within the next 6 months. I thought that was an interesting one to note. That's going on down in the City of Hobart at the moment. I think Launceston's part of that as well. Yeah,
it'd be interesting to have a yarn with Kelly Grigsby about that at some stage, Chris.
Yes, the CEO of the City of Hobart. It would be, you're right. Now, you've been travelling around the state, I believe, or you've at least been up into the north of the state, a very special part of the country, I have to say, Steve.
Where were you born? Where were you born, Chris?
I just happen to have been born in Cobram, now that you mention it. Yes.
Well, wouldn't you know that Tony Roundage from Hunt and Hunt and I went to Cobram this week, and we were fortunate enough to do a land use planning for councillors workshop all afternoon with the Moira Shire councillors and their executive team, and they were terrific. Had a great time. And we spent a lot of time talking about the fact that the municipal strategic statement is a really key document. And in the I guess the strategic planning hierarchy, it sits alongside the health and wellbeing plan. And I was reminded how it's a bit of an opportunity for councillors to play SimCity.
That's a very good way to put it. I used to love SimCity years ago.
Somehow thought you would, because it's an opportunity to really look at the shape. And you think about a place like Moira, where no one has any certainty about what's happening with agriculture, but it's changing. And it's an opportunity for councillors to really consult, to research, to identify what's the type of community that they want. And then the land use planning elements under the Planning Environment Act will flow out of that. So really powerful stuff.
That's really good to hear, but all I can think about now is thinking back to when I used to play SimCity. I think it was SimCity 2000, and which obviously was futuristic at the time. So what are we going back? 40 years, 35?
Look, it could be, but the landscape's changed, Chris, because I'm tipping when you played SimCity, there was never a prospect of Jeff Bezos and Amazon approaching your council and saying, oh, how about you make me an offer so we can put a distribution centre here, and having to wrestle with, well, what would that mean for the quality of life and the sort of jobs in your town?
Pretty sure that wasn't in the game at the time.
No, I knew that.
No. All right. So it's been a week for tripping down memory lane for me this week, Steve, because frighteningly, it was 40 years ago this very week that I started my first paid employment job.
Oh, no, I won't even go there, Chris. But congratulations on that milestone, young man.
At GMV6 in Shepparton, it was. But anyway, there we go. I don't know why I brought that up. Let's go to VLGA Fast Track, which is coming up on the 18th of March. I'm hearing on the street, Steve, that people are really impressed with the program that's been put together for this. I think you're going to be overwhelmed with interest.
We're really happy with the number of registrations that have come in so far. It's exceeded our expectations. Chris, the panels are terrific. We've certainly locked in a couple of eminent professors, Andrea Carson and Carolyn Hendricks from ANU. We've locked in Professor Anona Armstrong, who has done the academic work in the Cultural Review with Lucy Dalton from Local Government Victoria. We've got a cracking panel at the end of the day with Professor Liam Smith from Monash University, who knows all about nudge theory and is really practical, and Sandro De Mayo and Kathy Henderson. And our big shout out will be for people, do not leave early, because the hypothetical panel will just be terrific, and it will also feature Chris, Eddy, and if anyone's been wondering about what John Lloyd Fillingham actually looks like, guess what?
Yes, I had heard for that last session you've had to scrape the bottom of the barrel, but be happy to help out.
No, it will be a bit of fun and will really stretch people's minds in terms of the topics around trust that we'll be talking about on the day. So the details for the 18th of March event are on the VLGA website. Mayors, deputy mayors, councillors, get your registrations in. Be a great day.
And I'm quite serious when I say, because I have had a chat to Catherine about this this week too, there aren't a lot of places left. This is going to sell out. So if you're interested, get in and book your spot quickly to avoid disappointment. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think that's a fair comment, Chris. We are approaching 50% of what we believe the capacity of the room to be.
With over a month to go.
Yeah, and one of the charms about the event, Chris, it is quite deliberately not a cast of thousands. The idea is for the attendees to connect with each other. And I'm not sure at the moment people want to be at big events anyway. So that's what we think is the beauty of it.
Very true. A bit of staffing news from VLGA before we go this week?
Yeah, terrific, Chris. We've made a couple of significant appointments. We run a project called Seat at the Table, which is funded by the Scanlon Foundation, and it's about supporting particularly young people from marginalised communities into leadership roles in the sector. In terms of where they would choose to go, maybe as councillors, it may be opening up opportunities for employment. And we've appointed Davey Wilson formerly from Whittlesea Council, Chris, for that role, but we're piloting at Whittlesea and Casey at the moment and hope to take that more widely.
This is probably where I should declare my association as administrator of the City of Whittlesea. No involvement in this, but really pleased to see it happening. And it's not lost on me that Casey and Whittlesea are the two councils currently under administration, so obviously a logical place to do that work about building future leadership.
Yeah, and both councils, Chris, had been doing some work already, and it was really important that we find a way to dovetail in and sort of complement but not compete with some terrific work that had been done anyway. Yes. The other role is we've appointed a lead for our YCCC project, Your Country, Your Community, Your Council, which again is a similar theme in relation to First Nations communities. Absolutely stoked to have been able to appoint Donna Spiller, formerly from Hepburn Shire Council, to that role. I probably owe a bit of a shout out to Bradley Thomas, actually. But Donna's done some terrific work, and some people may have seen an article on the ABC News this week about Jim Crow Creek project, which has been a passion for Donna recently. So we've been really stoked to get Donna involved in this project. And I am reminded also that Bradley is recruiting at the moment a governance manager. So anyone in governance looking to go somewhere, Hepburn would be worth a think.
So you're not tempted to go back into the governance manager field, Steve?
No, I don't think so, Chris.
You and I have both been there, actually. So yeah. Time for some fresh blood.
Done.
And you mentioned the YCCC. Just want to make the point, that's about the third time we've used CCC today. Nothing to do with Queensland's Crime and Corruption Commission. Nothing to do with Western Australia's Crime and Corruption Commission.
No crime and corruption in our YCCC, Chris.
Very, very different thing. All right, Steve, we'll leave it there. That's been a great chat about a whole lot of things, and we'll do it again next week.
Cheers, Chris.
Steve Cooper from the VLGA, and that's your VLGA Connect Governance Update, with our thanks as always to Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, terrific sponsors of this program. Do support them if you can, and we'll see you again next week on the Governance Update.